Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Cybersecurity Imperatives Vision 2020. My name is Sema. I work as part of the marketing team here at IIBA, and I will be your moderator. IIBA is an independent, nonprofit professional association serving the global business analysis community, a recognized global thought leader dedicated to elevating the discipline of business analysis. We provide our global community with relevant tools, professional development resources, and networking opportunities. A little housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the question tab in your control panel. We will answer questions at the end of the session. You can find today's deck in the Handouts tab. And last, today's webinar recording will be available on iiba.org in the webinar archives section in 5 to 10 business days. I'm pleased to introduce today's panelists, Dan RAYWOOD, who will speak to top cybersecurity risks and opportunities they offer to reorganize business and security plans, and BINDU CHANNAVEERAPPA, who will speak to opportunities to reorganize career plans and paths into this emerging area for business analysis professionals. Dan RAYWOOD is Deputy Editor at InfoSecurity Magazine, an online and print publication that supports and drives the information security industry forward with free educational content endorsed by all major industry accreditation bodies. BINDU CHANNAVEERAPPA is a business analysis consultant who is qualified from IIBA and BCS and is the Director of IIBA UK London. BINDU studied security management to make cybersecurity inclusive within business analysis and since has become a keen advocate. She's part of IIBA's cybersecurity certification team, authoring IIBA's cybersecurity certification curriculum, and is also an IIBA exam writer. Without further ado, let's kick things off with Dan RAYWOOD from InfoSecurity Magazine. Dan, over to you.
Sema, thank you very much. Let's show you my screen. Let's see what we are presenting today. And hopefully you can all see that. Yeah, big thanks to IIBA, excuse me, for having me today. And just delight to be speaking to you on this particular subject. And they've asked me to cover the area of top cybersecurity risks and opportunities to reorganize business and security plans. So hopefully what I present to you over the next, well, aiming for about 30 minutes or so, will actually give you some idea of some of the top cybersecurity risks and opportunities in this particularly burgeoning sector. Hopefully that's the right word, but sector that's very, very vibrant. We're going through our own recent challenges recently, of course, in the broader spectrum of technology, of course, with remote working becoming now the new norm, and as well as that, the ever popular probably the wrong word, but ever common tactic by attackers to jump on popular topics. So at the moment we have seen a lot of attacks using particular things like COVID-19, coronavirus. So these are opportunities we're going to talk about, and hopefully from that then you'll find some ways that you can talk to your business about cybersecurity. It's something hopefully businesses are already doing. So the first part of the presentation, I'm looking at the, as you can see on the screen there, stats, views, and the state of InfoSec or InfoSecurity. Hopefully that makes sense to you. And as I said, my name's Dan RAYWOOD. I'm the Deputy Editor of InfoSecurity Magazine. If you want to follow me on Twitter, I'm at Dan RAYWOOD, which is my name, and then I work at InfoSecurity Mag. That's the logo at the top. Right, just a little bit of a bio. Let's see if I can get the screen working. There we go. So just a little bio on me, really. I've been covering cybersecurity since 2008. I've actually been in journalism since 2001, but with particular focus on cybersecurity. Yeah, 2008, I was run a few websites, including being an analyst for the 451 research company in 2015. So just a little bit of my background there. So the whole point of first one I'm going to talk about today is the state of cybersecurity reports. This was the idea where we see many threat reports in this industry, and what we thought we'd do was let's do a threat report which really surveys our industry and gets an idea of what people are talking about. That's not to criticize other reports, some of them are incredibly good, but what we wanted to do was talk to businesses and talk to people about what do you think is driving cybersecurity, what are the big trends. And this came out in 2018, so we surveyed a great number of 32 people. It's quite a small sample set, but we did this at quite short notice and launched this at the InfoSecurity Europe conference, which takes place in June in central London. So we did a survey of 32 people, and these were the respondents. So those of you with a particular good math brain could probably figure out the number of people who cited each one. But you'll see there from the 2018 research, the top one there was GDPR and the concept of regulation and compliance. Now, I was doing the majority of the research around sort of the March-April period before writing the report and then it being published in early June. The deadline for GDPR compliance was the 25th of May 2018. So hence this was on everyone's minds at the time. And also there, as you can see, expanding threat landscape and evolving attacks, 34. Board level recognition of cybersecurity as a business risk, and hopefully does feed into what we're talking about today. And then cloud, a little bit lower, and then selling via FUD and panic. You haven't heard some FUD before. It's fear, uncertainty, and doubt, using panic methods, using methods to sort of make you think if you don't have this, everything's going to go wrong. That kind of concept. Now, only a small number, 18%, but it was actually enough people cited that to be in our top 5. So if we consider the fact that the board are recognizing cybersecurity because they're seeing this, spread across headlines and all that sort of thing, that's why that probably came so high. And the fact is that GDPR was probably bought into that FUD element because it was all, if you don't comply with GDPR, you're going to face 20 million euros or whatever, the 4% of your global turnover, which is not really a great way to really do run your business. But that's unfortunately the way things were going. Let's move on to, so version 2 came out in 2014 because actually version 1 was incredibly well received. So anyone in business will tell you, you do something well, let's do it again, really, and try and do it better. So 2019, we started a little bit earlier. We did some research around that. We increased the number of people participating. So this was last year. So we interviewed 60 people across the industry. So that was started around early Feb or something like that. And we ran for about 2 months talking to people. So yeah, we deliberately went for a larger sample set. I say 6 to 6 weeks. And from that, we determined 31 distinct trends. Now, from that, of course, we decided to sort of say, if I say to people, can you actually name something that people, can you name 31 distinct trends cybersecurity, whichever industry you're currently in. Let's say you're in automotive, can you name 31 trends affecting automotive? People probably think of about 5. And that's the whole point. People are thinking about 5. We come with 31, which really shows just how diverse. That's cybersecurity, which is a little part of IT, which is a little part of technology, just how broad this particular sector that we work in is. And from that, we decided to, we derived the top 5 trends. I'm going to run through those with you now. Just some people ask, actually, what kind of people were we interviewing? We were really focused quite heavily on sort of chief security officers, CEOs, chief technology officers, IT managers, consultants, business owners, people doing the job. So a lot of people who are leading companies in cybersecurity, a lot of people actually doing the job. It wasn't sort of deep down dirty kind of analyst level. It was a bit more sort of more senior level. So the people with a good broad sight of what's going on in cybersecurity. So let's move on to these top 5 points then. So number 1 then was actually around this concept of product problems. So 35%, not a particularly large number, but because it was a 31 distinct trends, it was a very broad sample set. And this includes quite a number of different factors, which I'll get to in the next slide, which include like more technology than problems. That's one of the key things, really, is that there's actually too many issues trying to resolve too few problems, if that makes sense. There was a direct quote, which I haven't included here, but is in the final report, which I can provide you links to. I think they said something like that, for 29 problems, we've got 26 solutions. So the idea then, we're actually trying to solve too many things with too few problems, or too many problems with too few problems. You know what I'm saying, too few problems with too many things. Also in there, companies stuck in a constant cycle of constant crisis. you can look at headlines, as I mentioned earlier, things seem to be going wrong all the time. So how do you get through that? Detection issues. One of the great noted cybersecurity cases was that of Target, the US retailer, where they had to they failed to detect an attack that came in through their heating ventilating company, through their third party. So how are they detecting that? They probably weren't, and of course they got away with it, the attackers that is. Also need better tools for vulnerability management. If you can't actually remediate your vulnerabilities, that's something we're seeing vendors move towards now. Legacy technology, this, I'm not saying that old stuff isn't great, but they're the biggest challenge of technology, because vendors will sell new stuff, but it doesn't always work with existing options. And people want to scale to the cloud, but technology may not work in that capacity. There's also the issue of support. And sometimes if patch management hasn't continued, then it comes to an end. The private provider doesn't fix it anymore, and you have to pay to get it fixed. So that's an issue, really, has been legacy technology. Again, not that they're saying this stuff is particularly bad, but it's quite a tricky one to deal with. Let's keep moving on. We've got 5 to get through, as well as some other factors. Number 2 was the often mentioned human factor. 31% of people said this was the biggest or second biggest trend, or second most cited trend. Let's get that correct. And it comes down to the factors here we're mentioning, that employees are not security experts. They do take the easiest route. They do reuse passwords, but it's about making their job workable and making security usable from the technology perspective. If you focus on user friendliness and usability, then actually you overcome the issues of actually trying to stop people doing their jobs, which is why security often sometimes can fail. And as we said, on the second point, their breach is down to internal errors. It's nothing really often. It's not about someone doing this maliciously. It's not, not everyone out there is an Edward Snowden or a sort of a Chelsea Manning. A lot of people out there just trying to get things from one place to another. Just before we started here, I backed up the phone numbers to my my Gmail in case my phone line goes, because that's not me being malicious. That's me trying to be prepared. So another few other things there, like emphasis on career options and upskilling people into senior positions. If it's an issue that we're not actually getting people up to the right positions, then we've got quite a challenge there in actually getting people trained up and getting them promoted, because there is a skills shortage. ISC Squared says something like 4 million people are needed in their most recent security workforce report. So if you're going to spend more money and time on culture, and you're going to try and address that skills shortage, and then what you need to do is train people up, and that it does count as part of the human factor. Let's move on then. Number 3. So as I said, compliance came in top last year, and 2 years ago now, 2018. And so 2019, this was actually 25% of our people we surveyed cited compliance. Now this includes GDPR, but also since then we've got regulations like the CCPA, for those of you who are US based or certainly even California based. I'm pretty sure you've heard of the Consumer Privacy Act, and also PSD2, which is about Payment Services Directive. That's kind of an ongoing one, and if you're interested in learning a bit more, either tweet me afterwards and I'll point you to an article I wrote for InfoSecurity some point last year, or there's some great learnings out there which will give you more information on PSD2. But part about that is actually about open banking standards, and also ensuring that you can actually have strong authentication for your open banking standards. So these are kind of big areas that's still driving compliance forward. So was it the case that compliance was seen as a state in time thing? Or was it just the fact that it's gone down a bit? Well, let's move on just to some of the points there, where, as you can see, their compliance top 3 and 25%. It's about the frameworks. Now, the key point there is number 2 and number 4 there. Disappointment over lack of fines. And also, we expected more data privacy breaches, or probably action over data privacy breaches, because ultimately, as I said at the very top there, we were this belief that GDPR, was going to be this great bastion of bringing businesses, to account and taking them down and saying, how dare you not deal with things the right way? Here's a massive fine, go and resolve it. Well, in fact, we haven't actually seen that. And at the time I put this particular report out, version 2 of 2019, this came out in June 2019, and about a month later, we actually saw the first intent to fine from the UK ICO. They were against British Airways and Marriott over the Starwood breach. So again, it was sort of a little bit presumptuous that things weren't going to be great. But there's also some positives on compliance. As I said there, it's driven more emphasis on incident response and changed how businesses handle data. So actually, GDPR, from a compliance perspective, has actually improved the way that people are working. And again, international impact. A lot of people presume that CCPA is kind of partly based on GDPR. You can probably see the links between the two, because GDPR has been rolled out for about 4 years before it actually became law. And then in that time, I expect the Californian, whoever responsible for data privacy in California was probably slightly influenced by that. Number 4 then is around company and board engagement. Once again, from year on year, this has become a really big factor, because it's about how the security team needs to be part of the business. It's less about communication with the board. It's more about actually engaging with the company and what the company does. And also, even though it does drop one place, where it was 3rd last year and now it's 4th, one quote we actually got when I was doing the research was, if the security team understands what the business is trying to achieve, then they have a better chance of succeeding. In other words, if you're actually able to say, this is what my business does, and we make this, or we build this, or we provide this, then you know what your business is doing and what you should be doing as a security department. Let's just move on some of the finer points about that then. So, business people in an immature market. Now, that's not to diss business owners, but that's not to, whoops, gone straight. A little bit of a preview there. That's about business people actually in an immature market. It's a different discussion now between the CEO and the board around cybersecurity. As I said at the top, this whole thing about FUD, about mis-selling. Ultimately, whose job is it to solve cybersecurity? Talk to anyone in cybersecurity, they'll say it's the responsibility of the whole company to be about cybersecurity and actually be part of the business's enablement. And again, board awareness of cybersecurity is something that was cited, slightly different from the other points about the discussion. Whether if the board are only seeing the negatives that are on the the headlines of the newspapers and the news, and everything, oh, cybersecurity is terrible because the government can't get into WhatsApp and see what the messages are, and they're only reading about the negative things. Well, at the moment, at the very top, I mentioned about COVID-19 phishing. What we're actually seeing now is lots of people coming together now and actually finding ways to work together to enable businesses that aren't keeping up with security through sort of voluntary groups. So there's a lot of positives, but like anything, particularly in cybersecurity, we dwell so much on the negatives that it's kind of negative, really. And let's just move to that 5th point, which you've got a slight preview of there. So automation. This is kind of an interesting one, automation, because it's been hanging around now for a couple of years, and it's something I think that a lot of people talk about. So I actually decided to combine 2 common trends, which are machine learning and artificial intelligence, AI. So 2 trends that people do have mixed views on, but people see this as a driver. I was presenting this actually at a university last year, and someone said, I don't see that they sit in the same space, machine learning and AI. And I'm like, oh yeah, but I'm a former analyst. We like grouping things together and putting them under a different header so you can actually understand what these things are. But let's move on to the just some of the comments on these. So it has some mixed responses, and say automation first, human second is what one person said to me when I was doing this research. If you lead an automation first concept, not trying to build it retrospectively, build it around your business, then that's the way it can succeed for you. Also rethink how you can do digital forensics, incident response, and run your operations center. It can help with the way you're doing things if you can automate your tasks. But on the negative side, there are 2 points on the right-hand side. We're talking about a lack of understanding of AI. People not really unsure what exactly it's all about, and the negativity around FUD. Again, once I mentioned this a few slides ago, too much fear, uncertainty, and doubt. If you don't do automation, if you don't automate your alerts that people can deal with, every little piece of dodgy email that comes in, and you can't deal with it because you've got a person to look at every single one, that's ineffective. Well, That's not really the way things are going to work, but it is an immature market, as we said, and behavior and analytics is something we are seeing now with, especially with banks. Those of you listening who are from financial services, I don't need to talk about how user behavior analytics is a major part now of actually detecting fraud and detecting anomalous, malicious, possibly even transactions. So automation, it's only 18%, but it did come up, and I didn't include any slides here because I didn't want it to sort of make a huge part, but we did do like future trends, because it's only a smaller sample set, but we did ask what the sort of big future trend you see, and automation was the big one, so it really kind of pushed it forward. So we're going to just look at some of the other points now. Say 31 were determined, and we start with these 5 lower trends. This is like 6 to 10 if you're kind of those of you fans of the charts. It's 5 here. So number 5 there, or number 6 I should say, was cyber hygiene. This is an interesting term which goes around how to do the basics right and how to run your business at the most straightforward level. This includes things like patch management and asset management and possibly even something like cyber insurance. But it's been a real sort of driving trend for work we did over the past kind of 18 months in info security. This concept of what does normal look like? What does efficient look like? How great can you be at the best bits or the easy bits? I'll refer to a comment I got on a webinar I was moderating for info security, where someone said, if the basics were so easy, we'd all be doing them. And that's been the problem with cyber hygiene, is it's been bandied around as this very simple thing to do, simple concept, when actually it is quite a hard thing to do. But if you've got that level where you can say that's the level we need to get to, then that's what you need to do. But that comes down to your business and your risk posture, really. Second one there, cloud, was in the top 5 last year. That kind of takes in things like also infrastructure as a service, which takes in AWS and Azure. Also proliferation of cloud, get that word out, where within businesses, people drive up their own private clouds, they put data in there, they use it, again, not maliciously, it's done purely for the perspective of actually doing their businesses well. 2 there regarding kind of the offensive side. One was about APT, which is advanced persistent threat, and nation state attacks, where businesses getting hit by a nation state vector. Not as common as you'd think, but it does happen. Malware, which is kind of more general, so we banded into sort of malware, things like ransomware, and also the advancement of attackers. But depending on who you listen to, attackers aren't that advanced at all. They're just reusing malware and try and turn it around on dark web markets to actually use it for a different attack or sell it to somebody else. And the last point there is about agility and digital transformation. This is about driving the business and about security keeping up effectively. If the business is trying to be transformative and well, they've kind of been caught out at the moment because if part of your idea of being agile was to get more people out of your office, then you've kind of been stung with this, really. So it's been kind of tricky one to actually keep up with. But yeah, it's an interesting one. It is about agility and businesses trying to be more just more forward thinking, really. But they've been kind of pushed into this position now where that has been forced upon them almost. Just a sort of quick flag of this one. This was a single response trend where literally was cited by one single person. Now, if you're not particularly cybersecurity specialist, then some of these may mean absolutely nothing to you. But there's a few things in there like fraud and analytics and ratings, which really were quite surprising that they didn't kind of come up a lot more. Government intervention was different from the attacks. This was more about their sort of stepping into cybersecurity issues. So interesting that those 9 points weren't cited anymore. Just kind of little plug then. So currently I'm working on version 3. It is currently underway research. We'll probably be pushing this out at Info Security Europe in London in June. There's my email address. I'm going to put my email on the last slide as well. In particular, we talk to like academics, investors, venture capitalists. We have no trouble reaching private businesses, but we do kind of interested in breaking the sort of the verticals up a little bit. So if you're interested in talking to us about this particular version that we're doing this year, say we're currently researching on that, then do drop me an email or tweet me at Dan RAYWOOD. And I'm on LinkedIn as well. Hopefully there's only one of me, so you can find me there. So let's just talk about the main point then we're trying to talk about with this particular session, and it's top cybersecurity risks and opportunities to reorganize business and security plans. Now, I've put these into two different sectors then. So risks in what we've talked about so far. Malware, someone trying to actively and offensively attack your business. Attack from a standard or sophisticated hacker, someone who is actually, a hacker is a different term, by the way. In our industry, some people say we don't use hacker because that's often seen as sort of a positive thing, so we'll use attacker from now on. But attack from a standard or sophisticated attacker. Some standard is someone throwing something at your business like phishing, which actually can be very, very simple, very straightforward, or sophisticated where they're using much more sophisticated tools. I haven't gone into it too detailed today, but something like business email compromise, which actually doesn't really encourage much more than social engineering, where someone tries to get into your business by coming to you and saying, hi, they find out the name of your CEO's secretary, for example, or personal assistant, and they pretend to be them, and send you an email and say, yes, let's pretend to be you, please send me $10 million. And you're like, okay, that sounds normal. And then you've lost $10 million to an attacker. Also, risk regulatory issues, even though we kind of haven't seen too many fines associated with regulatory frameworks, the regulatory issues are a big deal if you get caught out, not only from a financial perspective, but also from a kind of a reputation basis. Detection and alert fatigue. If you're constantly trying to pick up things going on and you're not able to actually deal with them, then that can be quite a hit upon a human person. So automation is obviously a big deal. And also the last point there is humans can be the weak link. It's a forever debate in cybersecurity is, are the humans your strongest or weakest link? If the human is going to be sort of person sitting behind a keyboard who isn't aware of some of the more basic stuff that they possibly should be, then maybe it's time to address that because that is a risk. Ditto opportunities. So get ahead on compliance. If you're able to appoint a data protection officer, if that's your requirement within the particular framework that you're working in, that's a good way to get ahead. Actually, you can work with things like PCI DSS, which is especially if you're in financial services or any kind of payment security, it's a good thing to get ahead on, because so people might want to talk to you about how you're actually able to lead on particular compliance frameworks. Talk to the board. If your board are on board, excuse the pun, if your board are actually engaging with you about cybersecurity, that's a great opportunity for you then to sort of elevate your whether you're going to security or in security and going to the board, then that's a great way to work forward. Employee engagement. If you're able to actually get your employees engaged, there's lots of ways of doing this. So look at, for example, like there's other things like phishing training and simulations. They kind of have mixed responses. Some people think they're a little bit flimsy and does create a lot of back work in dealing with the number of failures and how do you deal with those who failed. But it's one way of getting people engaged and actually getting in front of them physically. Okay, it's a little challenging at the moment, but if you're able to actually run sessions and teach people about the basics, then that's a really good way to treat cybersecurity as an opportunity. I mentioned automation there, and also cloud and SaaS, software as a service. SaaS is nothing new, but one of the big issues has been what we call shadow IT, where employees spin up their own clouds, as I mentioned earlier, and their own services, and as a result of that, then they are able to actually host your data in their particular environments, which leads you to compliance issues. So maybe trying a way you can combine those two of those opportunities is communicate with the board, get ahead on compliance and use SaaS to try and do that. Right, let's just move on then. So this is just a little bit of a wrap up really from what we got in 2020 was, the end of 2019, was lots and lots and lots of predictions. These coming from vendors, and they come to us and they say, this is what we think is going to happen in 2020. And what we did was rather than say, okay, let me write 25,000 articles on each one because no one's going to read these, let's just bundle them all together. Let's triage what the most popular topics are, and we'll turn them into this particular presentation. So I hope you can see what drove cybersecurity in this part, the first part of 2019 from that first part. And this is about what is predicted to be the case for 2020. Now, what you will see in here is a lot of people not getting the main point right, which is everyone's going to be stuck at home, self-isolating or social distancing. and everyone's going to be working remotely. No one really predicted that. I probably should have a really good thorough look through all the notes and see if anyone did predict that and give them some sort of prize. But the first one we got was about vulnerabilities and more issues caused by the end of support for Windows 7. This went, I forget the exact date, but sometime in January with the end of support for Windows 7. And as a result, vulnerabilities are caused because businesses aren't keeping up their aren't keeping patched, which it is a challenging thing for businesses to do. So just a few points here we got from some of the comments. These sort of slight snippets of the full comments, but the one there from Bitdefender at the top, they said, I'll try and read this slowly. Given the increased fragmentation of hardware and software and the adoption of large-scale open source and tweaked hardware design, we can likely expect a cascade effect when a vulnerability is found in a component and used en masse. Also, a bit slower than down there, further down, Fortinet talking about zero-day vulnerabilities. If you're not familiar with zero-day, that's the concept of a vulnerability which has no time to patch, so 0 days to patch. So, but these aren't that common, a lot less common than you'd actually think. And I say that 2020 end of Windows 7 from Fujitsu. Let's move on. A major breach is predicted. Well, this happens every year because, as I say, we're all too negative in cybersecurity. It's just the way things are. But, we saw a couple of years with Equifax in 2017. We saw Capital One in 2019, both affected by roughly the same issue, which was patch issues in Amazon Web Services. So major breaches can happen. As I said, there's 4 of the kind of say shortened comments from what we got. But as I talked there at the top, extra hot, they said, we're likely to see a major information leak from a cloud provider, or at the same time, the cloud providers are providing many useful built-in tools. It's not clear they're using their own tools to secure themselves. So they're saying that the cloud provider is actually going to be the one to actually call the forensic guys in. And just that second one there third one from extra hot there, they said sooner or later the big IoT breach is coming and it could have global implications. IoT devices around the globe are fertile hunting grounds for attackers, taking down every connected device from telemetry sensors to infusion pumps to mobile points of sale, and it could easily grind operations to a halt. Well, let's hope not. Let's definitely hope not. Next one, continuing challenges on authentication. Let me try and go through these a little faster just to keep up with time. They're talking about federated authentication, single sign-on, and adaptive multi-factor will become standard. That's according to Fujitsu. And deepfake technology. This one's a very interesting one from Jumio. They're saying that as so many biometric technologies are used, for example, the voice authentication, we're seeing a lot of banks do that now. If someone can deepfake your voice, it sounds like a lot of effort to get into someone's bank account, but people have time on their hands these days. Authentication is a huge part of this of cybersecurity still. It kind of the last 5 years we've seen it really rise up here, and we've seen especially companies like OneLogin and the companies like Geo and Centrify really step up to the mark and really deliver on the concept of authentication really becoming a huge part of it. And it's not just all about, like with Fujitsu say, increasing adoption of end-to-end password-less access. Passwords ain't going away, folks. Just believe that one. This one, I'll just kind of whiz through this one. Evolution of roles in cybersecurity. This is more about sort of the business side of things, really. How CISOs have been blocking collaboration by using legacy prevention technology. Progressive CISOs will focus on enabling collaboration. That's according to Code 42. The CISO, the Chief Information Security Officer, will be redesigned. They'll be more progressive, as we said earlier with the engagement point from last year's research. They're going to be involved in generating new revenue. They're going to be part of the business, not sitting in the basement. Those of you familiar with Chris O'Dowd and his team, then it's a big part of security being part of the business. More focus on consumer and personal privacy. And that's part of the compliance trend, I think, really. Again, CCPA comes to play here. Actually, it's gone about being about GDPR and being more about CCPA, because Data Theorem, they said CCPA fines will exceed 200 million in its first year of existence. That's this year, of course, 2020. And also, this was quite an interesting one from Baffle, a company I'm not too familiar with, but thanks for their emails. Companies begin to offer users the ability to destroy or shred their personal data. And that fourth one, also from Baffle, will we see a national data privacy law in the US? Kind of a hard one, because privacy laws have existed state by state until now, but we'll have to see how that rolls out. But the Eurofines, you ain't seen nothing yet. I did go and find that in regards to size and quantity of fines authorities are prepared to leverage. Next one then is about better counterintelligence and integration with law enforcement, leading to more efficient attribution. So just these last points here. Accountability, it's actually people want to point the finger. Now this might not be less about kind of, you know, saying it was down to them, more about actually possibly cyber insurance, because if you're able to say that it was a person rather than an organization that caused your breach, that might enable you then for cybersecurity, for your cyber insurance. And also attackers must differentiate between legitimate and deceptive traffic without being caught. This, you know, deception technologies have taken a big step up in the last couple of years. Companies actually doing deception technologies to enable you to better spot things whilst they're in action. And I think that's the last of the predictions, but I'm just going to do a quick summary slide for you then. So this was just sort of taking in all, hopefully both parts of research there. So detection is an issue, and more people feel comfortable dealing with malware and incidents. It's going to be a second piece of research sort of in between these two, which I decided to cut for interest of time. So compliance is an ever-present. Next generation are aware of the frameworks. And why it's not a top 5 trend, cloud is an ever-present, but more training is needed. Again, some other research which I can point you to if you want to either drop me an email or a tweet. And the last 4 there, you know, believe the hype on automation. It isn't a big FUD project. It is quite a big deal, and it's something that is going to aid you in your business. Vulnerabilities are not going away, and like I said, authentication is a major factor. And fact is, cybersecurity remains a hugely important factor of business. So we go back to the main title of this section was top security risks and opportunities to reorganize business and security plans. Then hopefully cybersecurity is a huge part of your operation. So there's my email. That's me on Twitter. Drop me a message if you want to get in touch. Big thanks for IIBA, and Semra, I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you, Dan. Up next is BINDU, and she will talk about how business analysis professionals can play an important role in cybersecurity solution design and implementation. BINDU, over to you.
Thank you, Sima. I hope you can hear me and you can see my screen as well.
Yep, looks great, thanks.
Perfect. First of all, thank you very much for the opportunity and honored to be part of this webinar. I'm sure from Dan's session, we definitely can see there's a lot of scope for work. And obviously, what are the opportunities for business analysts in cybersecurity? Let me start by telling you that every business analyst today will eventually be involved in cybersecurity. I'm sure you're wondering how that is the case. So let's look at that. As you may have recognized from the slide here, that it is a technology progression in the last 2 to 3 decades. I started my career as a systems analyst programmer, and my job was to work with clients, understanding their business requirements, design the database, and build a system to meet their needs. And I was doing all of this on this particular standalone computer, which was also called a desktop computer then. All my code, my executables, the operating system, the database, and the data, everything was in one physical system. I'm sure some of you might have worked on that, or maybe not. So the only vulnerability, of course, apart from securing the physical equipment, was using a floppy disk, which was used to copy data in and out of the computer, and could potentially corrupt the files if it contained a virus. I think I should be quite careful when I use the word virus now. Okay, so from standalone computer, then we started connecting computers and then calling it client server, LAN, WAN. And with the internet, we have distributed our systems across the globe. Today, customers can initiate a transaction in one location on a gadget and complete the same transaction in another place at a different time and on a different touch point. From wired, we have moved to wireless, and it's wearable today. So just try to identify the potential weaknesses or vulnerabilities in a globally distributed system. What are all the things that can go wrong? I'm sure the list can go endless. Don't even try that, because I have tried and it has driven me crazy. So there is no one solution. Unlike the one floppy disk then, vulnerabilities in the new landscape comes with its own risks and impacts, its own legal and compliance requirements to fulfill, people management, process management, just to name a few. From a systems analyst developer, throughout my journey to be a consultant, I had to adapt with the progressing technology. As we started connecting systems, my short list of user or system requirements also started to expand, taking the shape of non-functional requirements. And security was part of it. I think today this is where most BAs or many organizations are still stuck. Yes, this was absolutely fine a few years back, when security was limited to who can and cannot access the system, but not enough anymore. Disrupting and challenging the ecosystem has become the standard way for organizations today. Every organization is talking about digital transformations or the digital products. And they are making every effort to fill the gaps in customer journey so that their customers' experience can be enhanced every single day. And this is possible only with the technology expansion. Today, we have surpassed our system boundaries. It is the imagination that has become the new boundary. So the point I'm trying to make here is the more technology expands, the more vulnerable the ecosystem gets. And with that, more security controls are required. Did we ever imagine that at an onset of a road accident, calling the medical assistance, initiating the insurance process, and even calling a taxi so that the driver can continue their journey? All of this can happen now with a minimum time of 10 minutes. Did we ever think that we could be on a holiday and still keep an eye at our door front? And this is the beauty of technology. However, as the saying goes, when you pick up one end of the stick, you also pick up the other end of the stick. So if we choose technology, we inevitably also choose vulnerability. I'm not saying technology is bad, it is really good today. I mean, the whole world is working on technology today. Fantastic. But we have to be mindful about the vulnerabilities as well along with that. Most organizations today have left cybersecurity within the context of the IT teams or the security teams. Many people, when I speak with them at the conferences, all I hear is, yeah, we talk to security team when we need an access to an application, or the IT team is the one who does all the security, so we don't bother. And this is what the conversations I am having with business analysts. And that is where we will have to start thinking. Definitely, the security teams are the experts who can provide the solution or the control measures. They can only do when there is a stated requirement or a need for a control is identified. And that is what we BAs should be doing. Even in my personal experience, I have seen many organizations being oblivious to security incidents. In fact, my journey started like that. I was working on a project where none of us, the business, the project team, or the delivery team, actually saw that as a security project. The organization was losing their information asset, and the project was like any other enhancement or a change to a product, until the solution was delivered, which obviously was not fit for purpose. And it then occurred that all of us were seeing a completely different or a wrong picture there. And that is when I decided to study cybersecurity and start including cybersecurity analysis or security analysis within the scope of my analysis, and have been advocating the same. And Dan also did show us some of the research, and research proves that most of these cybersecurity incidents are due to the lack of awareness, and people are the biggest vulnerability. So now that we have established that there's a lot of work for business analysts to do in cybersecurity, let's see how we can make this happen. In this diagram, as we can see, the core is the BA knowledge. So all our BA skills, techniques, tools, frameworks, methodologies, process modeling, everything what we do currently as business analysts will still remain relevant. And the outer hexagons are the security knowledge areas or components. And each of these knowledge areas, our components, is quite comprehensive in its own right. But the middle orange area is of interest to us, business analysts. And this is the security knowledge that we BAs will need to learn. Of course, with this knowledge, we definitely can't become the experts, but we will be equipped enough to know the security aspects so that we can start asking the right questions and consult the experts as and when the project demands. It is exactly like how if we want to learn anything about the business domain or more about the business, we call upon the subject matter experts in that business area. And we are going to do exactly the same thing here. When we know that there is a security requirement or a cybersecurity requirement, specific things that the project involves, then we call upon the experts. So I guess the obvious question now is, how do we get this knowledge? There are different options. One is you could go back to university, and this is what I did, which is a kind of a longer route, or you could take up security courses online. There are several of them, but one course which I would recommend is the IIBA's Cybersecurity Analysis certification. I'm not recommending this because I was part of the building up this certification, but the reason is because this course is specifically tailored for business analysts. So we get the whole package. I'm sure you can get all the information on the website. So now you know that what you can do in the long run. I would like to leave with you with some takeaway, that is some of the questions that as BAs you could be asking when you go back to work tomorrow, when you're working from home tomorrow, and initiate the conversations around cybersecurity in your projects. So if you're working on risk analysis, or if you're involved in pre-project analysis, iteration planning, some of the questions you could ask us: what are we trying to protect here, and why is that important? Are we concerned about the confidentiality of the data, or the tampering or the integrity of the data, or is it just the availability of information that the organization is most concerned about? What are the risks, And again, Dan also reiterated that make sure that cybersecurity risks are also part of the overall risks. Identify what is the risk appetite, or maybe even readdress it to make sure we include cybersecurity risks if it is not already included. But I think one of the important question here is to ask is, does the organization-wide objectives really include cybersecurity? Because even the CTOs or CIOs who have signed above the dotted line in some of the cases are unable to define what their policy is. So I believe that this is quite a key question. It is not only for the senior management, but each and everyone in the organization. And yes, we need to have all the key people involved in cybersecurity decision making. It is just not somebody who is seeing things in silos are making those decisions. And if you're in a designing phase, you could check if the operating model has all the required aspects for protecting our information. We just saw in the previous slide. And if any of those components or aspects are involved, and do we need to kind of even check that we need to address any of those issues or any of those components or not? What are the data that needs to be segregated, and what is the data which is more sensitive than the other? Yes, I'm referring to the GDPR here. And you could even check with the system architects if they are able to track the flow of critical data, and is that critical data protected at every point wherever it needs to be. And as a business analyst, are you calling out all the scenarios? And again, one of the important question which really makes everybody think is, yes, as a business analyst, if at all we are creating personas, are we creating a persona of the bad guy or a hacker? Because normally that's not at all in the playground, is it? So yeah, where there are alternate paths include what can go wrong as well. And if we are in the development phase, again, or you're collaborating or even part of the elicitation, some of the things for consideration is, who are the people on the team, third parties accessing the system, are there any security requirements, again, GDPR related ones, and what does the contractual agreement say? Do we need to readdress any of those? And I think one of the important in the development phase is, does our developers not only understand what they are delivering or what they are developing, but equally important question is, do they understand why is that piece of functionality is required? What is that we're trying to protect here in terms of security? So again, it's all about seeing things in a security perspective as well. And of course, testing, another key factor here to make sure we just not only perform the pen tests, which I know most organizations do, but also perform a white hat test, which is similar like a hacker, but for non-malicious reasons. And if your organization is already having a security framework implemented, you can be part of it. Or if the organization is trying to get a security framework put in place, then again, I guess BS can really contribute, whether we are identifying the information assets or clearly stating the business objectives to protect the information assets, or even just doing all the analysis or providing the right information in creating the policy itself. And again, reiterating what Dan mentioned earlier is to educate senior management that their commitment to cybersecurity is important. And it's not only their commitment, but they should demonstrate their commitment as well, so that everyone in the organization can do the same. Again, another important thing is constantly reviewing it and continuously improving it. It is a process that has to be in place, whether it is the business process or the system controls or the policies. So in a sense, BAs can make sure that we are not just ticking the boxes, but clearly understanding what we are achieving by ticking the tick box. Basically, something like the cyber hygiene, what Dan was referring to as well. And see, basically, what I'm trying to say here is, to sum it up, is this is like a paper chase game. The chasing game has always been here and it will continue. But being well informed on the breaches and technology progression innovations can help the organization to keep up to date, or not only on the failures, but also remain ahead in the chasing game. And there's a lot that we BAs can do, and because we are the kind of leaders who lead from middle. So we talk to the business, we talk to senior management, we talk to the development team, we talk to the end users. So I personally think that we definitely can make a lot of difference by just having those conversations and making sure that each and everyone is aware of this huge responsibility, which is the word I think is rightly put there as cybersecurity. So I hope you had some information to take away so that you could take action tomorrow and also in the long run. Thank you very much. Back to you, Sima.
Thank you so much for that, Bindu. And just in support of everything that we just heard from Bindu, trends in the global market indicate business analysis skills have become a foundational need in a variety of career paths, and cybersecurity analysis is no exception. As you can see here in this graphic, in the cybersecurity analysis arm of it, some of the roles that business analysis can hold are cybersecurity analyst, cybersecurity consultant, information security analyst, network security analyst, and I'm sure there's many more out there. So we are just, we have about 4 minutes left before our time is up here. So I'll take some questions from the question box. So we will answer as many as we can during the time that we have left. For Bindu, this question is for you. Was it challenging to shift mindset to focus more on the non-functional requirements for cybersecurity? Was it a natural shift for you?
I think until I saw what we had missed, because very clearly the project wasn't successful, and that is where, and I think we business analysts come with an analytical mind and curious, and we are all learners as well, and that is how we can remain relevant as business analysts. So I think that is where, from a standalone machine, just even to kind of have very few lines of requirements to what the user stories, the number of user stories, what we write today for each and every functionality is a shift, and that's the learning curve which all of us have to undergo. So I think it came very naturally. The growth was quite natural, if that is the answer, if that's the question was referring to.
Thank you, Bindu. And this question is for Dan. What is your view on current attacker activity? Is their activity really as broad as reported, or is it all hype?
I think it is as broad as reported. I don't think anyone's making up fake news. Let's put it that way. I saw some statistics the other day where they actually said, I won't name the company, but I saw some, because on a different webinar, but where they said that, actually there has been a spike in detections on, like say, COVID-19 coronavirus phishing. So yeah, it's not hype. A lot of it is very true. So yeah, do believe what's out there, but a lot of it sometimes takes a bit more seriously than others.
Thank you, Dan. Next question is for BINDU again. Are there specialized knowledge areas for us before I think they mean business analysts. Are there any specialized knowledge areas before we take the CCA exam? And CCA is cybersecurity, it's certification cybersecurity analysis exam for those of you that aren't familiar with the acronym.
I don't think so. We need to kind of be very much literal in terms of the cybersecurity knowledge areas. I think because we have kept it very generic, even for those who are business analysts or who are not business analysts. So I think it would be quite comfortable even without any prior knowledge.
Thank you, Bindu. And that's all of our time today. We were only able to get to a few questions, but the questions that we didn't get to, we will be sure to get back to you via email. Thank you, everyone, for being here. We appreciate you for taking the time to advance your professional knowledge and attend this webinar on cybersecurity. And just to wrap up with a few thoughts here, the role of business analysis in cybersecurity is rapidly on the rise, as we've seen by what our presenters told us throughout the webinar. According to cybernetsolutions.com, unfulfilled cybersecurity jobs worldwide will reach 3.5 million by 2021. In today's world, cybersecurity is imperative to the successful operation and continued success and innovation of organizations. And organizations must plan for better analysis in the facilitation of the design, implementation, and management of cybersecurity solutions, and move cybersecurity from a bolt-on approach to a built-in approach. And this is where good analysis comes in, and this is where business analysis and cybersecurity analysis comes in. We encourage you to empower yourselves and empower your team with professional development that will enable them to play an important role in the design and implementation of cybersecurity solutions for your organizations and meet the business objectives of a security system, of a secure system for your organization that is very critical in today's world. Thanks again for joining us today, and we will see you next time.